Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, leading publishers of books, directories, educational guides and magazines aimed at schools in the UK and beyond. Enjoy the podcast.
Good morning, Mary. Lovely to have you back.
It's lovely to be here. Thank you.
It's been a while, but I have still been following you and seeing the incredible progress that you have made. Can you tell me what you've been up to?
Oh wow, it has been a very eventful year, I would say, because I've had so many projects, leading to kind of talking about non-native English speaking teachers, how they can market themselves, what they can do to overcome the objections that are constantly and consistently being thrown at them. And yeah, I've written an article on the El Gazette, thanks to Melanie Butler, about hiding behind privilege. I've tried to raise awareness on this topic more and more, and I've done recently some live events where I've asked some experts to join me with the conversation that I was having and kind of provide value and their own insights to this topic that I've been treating for the past 2 years at this stage. Yes,
it's been I remember we met in Venice at
the Equals,
at the Equals conference, and you were quite provocative in some sessions, which people didn't expect, did they?
No, and I have to say that I still don't think that they are ready for this type of, the wider audiences are not ready for an upfront confrontation. It's how they see it, I think, when I talk about this topic or this theme, right? Because ultimately what I'm saying is that the ELT industry is kind of discriminatory and racist, and not many people are seeing it. And some people are seeing it the same way, but they don't want to put themselves so much on the line as to speak about it as openly as I would. And, granted, I understand that a lot of people are maybe not in the place, or it's a taboo topic within the industry. But I want to take advantage as much as I can with my own platform in exposing it and, providing some insight and what I call real talk.
I'm playing devil's advocate here a little bit, because I'm not sure if you joined the YLT conference this year.
I haven't actually.
There was a very, very prominent person from the British Council, and he actually did touch on this in his presentation. It's a really good one if you can get back to watching it. And he told the story of a highly qualified Delta non-native speaker who lived in France. She was Polish, I believe, and she had applied to hundreds of schools in France and was not employed because she wasn't a native speaker.
Yes.
But she was employed at the British Council, and she's one of their, very good, strong, qualified teachers.
Sure.
British Council, in a certain sense, is it's one of the leading organisations alongside International House. And certainly in Italy, there are the ISLE schools, which I kind of frequent through exams work. And they seem to be really recognising the qualified,
yes,
very
definitely.
good non-native speaker.
And I'm really grateful for that, first of all, because when people touch, and whoever it is that talks and speaks about these troubles and issues, whenever they talk coming from a personal experience, or talking about someone who has been through it, I think it's kind of validating for the majority of us who have been through the processes and know exactly what it is like. And the second thing was, I feel that things are changing, and they have been changing towards the better. I just don't understand how, even though I think we spoke about this also last year when we did this recording, that it's a matter of, we have raised awareness, people are changing their belief system, they are recognizing that qualification is more important than a birthplace, but still the ads haven't changed.
Yes.
And still nationality plays a very big part in the hiring system and the recruiting system. And still people call for, inner circle countries and people coming from the US and the United Kingdom and Canada and New Zealand and Australia, maybe not even so much Ireland, but still it is still in the requirement. So I see the change, yes, definitely. More people are aware, more people are fighting these discriminatory practices. However, we can't say that the issue has been solved. I've been, since the last time we spoke, I've been more active on LinkedIn. And I've been getting, job ads and receiving some, I'm in the ELT professional groups, and I've been looking at what the conversations are about. And
what kind of things do you do? I've noticed you've called out a couple of ads. What other things have you been doing?
Well, yes, I do that. I keep raising. I've been creating workshops, and an upcoming series is coming very soon on LinkedIn. It's going to be a free event and a session, a series of sessions with experts. I'm not going to be addressing this issue directly, as I think that maybe by spreading awareness through a kind of a wider prospect of conversations regarding ELT professionals could do better in terms of making it more digestible, I'm going to say.
So you've essentially broken it down into small parts.
Yes. I want to take a look at it with, the different, from the different perspectives and angles, and which are going to be very important and interesting for ELT professionals, whether they are native or non-native. So we're going to take that out of the equation for now. And really investigate, go really deep into what are we doing in the classrooms and what materials we're using, how the CEFR descriptors are playing a part in, helping us address certain issues or choose the resources or the materials in our lessons. So we're going to take it a bit from a wider perspective and angle, but I can't promise that I won't be bringing into, the conversation some aspects of being a non-native speaker in this general world of ELT, obviously, because it's something that pops up no matter what conversation we're having.
So essentially, are you looking at some of the teacher competencies in the CFR?
Yes, as well as what are the, the criteria that defines a proficient speaker of English, for instance. Also the recruiting areas I'm looking into, where I don't want to reveal too much, as I'm right now confirming who is going to participate. They're going to be like dialogues, basically, between myself and participants who are very important names in the ELT industry. Okay, so it's going to be very, the first session is going to be about culture and language. So culture versus language. Sometimes they're intertwined, sometimes they're not. And the majority of English schools sometimes, or, they justify why they don't have non-native English speaking teachers, because culture is so important, and they feel that native speakers or local teachers can explain culture and be a part of culture awareness, to guiding their students into that process of learning the language and the culture. They are the ones that are more able and fit to do that. So that's going to be the first session, for instance.
I mean, so I'm Australian, so I can talk about kangaroos, and we have everybody has Christmas on the beach. I mean, they're kind of stereotypes, aren't they?
I agree with you, but I feel that there is a wide, there is this preconceived belief that in fact that is not true, because having lived and been and I say lived in the climate and air, etc., of Australia, then you would be more apt to be doing that. So a lot of people do believe it, and I sense that I want to have an open conversation with those who believe those things, and be really open-minded into trying to figure out how much of it really is how can we put it, trustworthy, or how much that could be actually something that is true. I don't want to come at it with a, as you have just now, saying, isn't that really stereotypical? So you don't agree with it, but I want to have a more open attitude and an open mind.
I've actually lived more of my life in Italy than I have in Australia now. And let me tell you more about Italian
but you see,
culture.
what language schools would say, Jane, to this, they would say that the person who goes to England expects someone from England teaching them.
But usually when they get to the UK, most of the summer school teachers aren't.
Exactly. But that is the reason why they would be hiring more native speakers, or some native speakers, definitely, but fewer non-native English teachers.
What do you think about the impact of Brexit in all of this? Because that has actually...
No one has actually brought up this topic except for myself. I've asked the same question, especially here in Italy, where they say it's very, very important to, come, be European, act European, think like a European, and everything European is seen as like they put it on the pedestal. And yet, no one has the awareness of saying, well, the UK is not part of Europe anymore. No one has had that enlightenment. And we're pretending.
I know a lot of language schools are having real trouble recruiting because there isn't that easy flow of people from the UK.
Yes, exactly. And so many people are talking about, sometimes they justify, especially in Southeast Asia, you don't have the requirements, the right passport to go and teach in terms of visa applications and so on and so forth. But it seems that, or at least, I don't know if anyone who has reached out to say otherwise, that I don't think the UK citizens have had any trouble getting permits or visas to go anywhere, even though they're not part of the European Union anymore. So I'm not an expert here on the matter, but the fact of the matter is that no one seems to be questioning or asking themselves why certain things are still the same way, going in that same line and in that same direction. So that's a question I would like to ask one of my guests eventually.
You and I are both Italy based, and how do you see sort of the Italian take on it compared to the rest of Europe and Asia?
I think Italy, I'm sorry to say, I love Italy, but I think it's maybe 20 years behind in terms of any innovation and any understanding of what it takes to be a teacher. In my daily conversations, I'm still educating or trying to raise awareness on the fact that madrelingua or mother tongue speaker doesn't actually make a teacher. I'm still having those conversations, but like 3-4 times a day.
And who do you think?
Because I hear it so often.
Who do you think is deciding most of this? Is it the school or is it the parents?
It's the vicious circle of everyone fitting into each other's false belief, and this created, idea of, it's something that I think we create together in terms of the schools think that that's what their clients want and that's what their parents, want. And so they advertise that, thinking that that's what they need and that's what they are looking for. And then the parents are saying, even when they look for private language tutors and, people to follow their children, they're like, okay, but he or she needs to be mother tongue. And because that's what all schools are offering. So I'm going to go on with that narrative of that's the most important thing. And when I've never heard anyone who's just, from age 2 and 3, they start looking for a mother tongue speaker teacher. And that is the most valued asset that a teacher can have, is to be mother tongue here. It's never, and I keep saying, well, don't just stop at that, because Italian parents are very like helicopter parents, right? They really care about everything their children go through, what they're eating, everything has to be the perfect degree, everything. They're well informed of everything. But then I'm starting to, ask them, okay, this person works in a language institution or in a private language school. How much do you know about them? Are they in fact qualified to teach? Because I know for a fact that personally, the language school that first hired me without any qualification. So I have been, on the receiving side of this. So I was not qualified to teach, but I was working for a language school. So for some, just because I was in a language school, I was fully qualified.
This is sort of, some alarm bells are ringing here.
Mhm.
If they're not qualified, or maybe the qualifications haven't been checked, what about security checks?
Yes, I wonder myself, is there any, there's so many accrediting bodies that have to look into who the personnel and the staff of the schools are. I personally know about a lot of language schools that don't have qualified personnel. And I wonder, and that's another one of the topics that I want to dig into, who are these accrediting bodies, and how deep do they go into searching for specific qualifications that the teachers hold or should be holding?
But also information on like background checks. I mean, as I was at the British Council for 24 years, and one of the things that we would do every year is background checks in the UK. And for people who've been living in Italy like me for such a long time, I would always have to get the nulla osta from the courts to, to demonstrate that I am a safe person to be working.
Well, safety is one thing that I had to do as well for language schools, just that there's nothing against me, that I'm, not being pursued for anything that I did that was illegal, but not for qualifications. And I often, I've come across a lot of articles, and one that made me really think and question this, right, is that if you can't, as a native speaker, so if you can't practice or be in the education field or be a teacher in your own country, then you shouldn't be able to teach anywhere else. Whereas
so
that is not.
That we changed the actual qualifications that we're asking for. So looking for PGCE trained teachers who then might go on and do a CELTA or a Delta. What?
Well, it has to be, to me, it has to be education related, right? Someone in the education field. In Italy, we have a lot of people with diverse backgrounds and diverse studies who have a 4-week course in a CELTA or a TEFL, etc., and they are okay to teach. But a non-native English teacher, and again, this is the topic that arises every time we speak about it, is that I can have a master's degree, I can have a CELTA, I can have a Delta, but still I'm not quite enough. It's not enough. I can have a clear background check, and yet someone who has not studied languages, someone coming from a monolingual culture, who has done totally different studies, can still get access and be perceived as much better than anyone who has dedicated, effort and time into getting an education and a formal training, which wasn't a 4-week course, but was 5 years long. And that's where things are very unequal, aren't they?
Yes, it's not particularly well balanced.
I mean, do teachers, English teachers without any, let me put it this way, let me rephrase it this way. How far can an English teacher without a specific degree in English language teaching or linguistics, how far can they go within their own native country? Would a 4-week course be enough for them to be teaching at what level?
True. Yeah. No, I think that's very much worth investigating. I would assume that they could be employed in sort of technical institutes or sort of those kind of organizations to get the experience up, but they would then need to go on and do Delta or even an MA. That would make sense to then kind of move into more professional roles.
And I also wonder why the Delta, for instance, in Italy is not such a recognized qualification at all, whereas it's fully recognized everywhere else, really. But Italy doesn't seem to have it on their map.
Yeah, I had a friend. I mean, but even like, I know, for example, I'm looking into doing a master's next year, And I know that a lot of organizations will recognize my Delta and give me points for it.
Yeah.
Towards the VMA, so I don't have to do certain core modules, which is really great. So they're recognizing it at master's level, which is the level it is actually pitched at. But here in Italy, it doesn't seem to be worth anything. But then, I mean, I've got friends who are at university, and they have since, you know, they joined sort of university 20 years ago, continually have to reapply for their jobs. And they've done masters, but they're not recognized.
Yes. Yes. I had that same thing when I was applying to do my master's in language studies. So it was like that. And I think that I had to fish out for my Delta handbook to demonstrate that I was at least a C1 and C2 level. Because they wanted a proficiency level certificate, and I didn't have one because I had a teacher qualification. I didn't think I needed a proficiency kind of test done. But I had to really, because they said, okay, show us something that will, you know, attest to your level of being at least a C1, because then you would get some extra credit and you wouldn't need to do the English test, which really I had no trouble doing, but I thought, okay, it's going to be more hours of studies, you know, and I had to. So I wanted to prove that to them. And I went into the Delta handbook and I found that, you know, only C1 to or C2 level proficiency level could have even taken part in doing the Delta, say. And they recognized it at a C1 level, so the minimum, because it was C1 and C2, they recognized it as a C1 level, giving me like 3 extra points or something like that. But that was it. I wasn't, you know, nothing else came from it except for that. And therefore, in this past year, I've gone through the testing systems as well. And I've taken the IELTS. Last June, I've taken the IELTS, and I did the Thai exam recently.
Yeah,
and I got
what was that?
You know, test for interactive English. I'm actually glad I did it because it really tested my skills to a C2 level across all skills. And unfortunately, again, that is the level expected of non-native English teachers in some organizations. So C2 level across all skills, which is, I assure you, very hard to get, especially if you're taking a test like, I don't know, a proficiency test like the IELTS, for instance, because it's literally, I would say probably someone has obtained a 9 in all skills, but it's really, really hard because it's, you know, a high stakes exam, which doesn't really look into the actual way you have of communicating in English. It's not anything interactive. It's very passive if you think about the listening and the reading, the text that you might have no awareness of because, you know, it's a topic that you've never treated before. So to just put it, you know, there had been a sort of a research done on what a native level speaker would have gotten on the IELTS, and the average score was 6.5.
Yeah, C1.
You know, and so it is definitely not okay if you want to become a teacher. So I went into, you know, kind of a phase where I was looking for something that would realistically assess my level of English without having to go through all these strategic exams. And the Thai was the right one for me because I thought that, you know, it's recognized in Italy by the
Yeah, is it recognized by MUA?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And so I had to do that because, as we were saying, you know, the Delta didn't quite elevate my profile as one would have imagined.
It's extraordinary though, isn't it? I mean, having done the Delta and having also, you know, supervised and been a tutor.
Yeah, I trained for the IELTS, yet I didn't get a 9 across all bands, you know, I did in all skills to prove that I was a C2 level in everything. Yet I was teaching the IELTS and I did my module 3, you know, creating a course for IELTS, but designing a course from scratch. But yet I didn't make it either. So that makes you question, are we really testing our learners' knowledge? You know, they often say it's for academic purposes that they do that. Yes, but how realistic are they for someone who is a student of English to get a very high result and a result that would reflect in actual fact their own skills, that they've acquired through years and years of learning. So yeah, I don't think I'll teach IELTS the same way as I did before after having taken it. Yeah.
Maybe I had Fatime on the show a couple of weeks ago, and she's a real expert in what IELTS teachers really need. If you want to listen back to that, she has quite a lot to say on how to really help students focus, because it is a very
oh my gosh, it's one thing, one thing you can be certain of, if you ask someone who is a native speaker if they've taken it, it just, not many people have, I don't think. I haven't found anyone else who's been through it, but when you do, like other than myself, it's very stressful. It's very, very I don't know, it just doesn't put you at ease. And the fact that everything is timed and there isn't much time to do any of the listening is super fast, and there are points where it's deliberately made to make you, kind of make it harder on you.
Well, I don't know if it's to make it harder on you, but it's to, I know, for example, proficiency, you need a pretty long, it's a very, very long day. I think it ends up being about 9 hours.
For IELTS, it's about 4 hours, definitely, that you're at, that's it, without a lot of breaks in between, I would say. So it's and the written part, so I scored an 8.5 in the writing, and I'm still wondering what I might have done wrong, considering that I write articles, I've written a whole, I just don't understand how that could have been. And the only thing I scored a 9 in was the speaking, and which was the only human factor that I had, because there was someone who was, but it wasn't natural as the Thai was, for instance, because they had like a set of questions that were very robotic, and they just went faster and faster just to see how fast I could elaborate a response to it. But it didn't feel like a human interaction. No one would do that in real life, if you know what I mean. No one would speak to you in a way to have you fumbling for words, or what a strange question to have asked. Okay, I'm going to try to.
I think that's the kind of trying to get to the abstract concept. So
exactly,
throwing something at you and saying,
like, who did you meet today? I would say that was what would you say? Oh my God. Okay, hold on a sec. It's not the way speaking would happen between two people in an outside setting, in a real world setting. So yeah, it had me thinking about what we actually expect of our learners as well as a teacher. So.
Also what we expect of our teachers. I know, for example, a lot of organizations have competence-based interviews, which is kind of it was very, very popular 10, 15 years ago, but some organizations are still using it. And it was interesting talking to my dad, who's quite into sort of recruitment, and how now there are sort of different phases to recruitment in Australia anyway. One is kind of getting you out in an informal situation and seeing, it would be great if you could come up with an exam that kind of replicated this. An informal situation, sort of having a coffee or a quick drink to kind of see what you like and how you interact. Yes. And then going to sort of more formal interview styles and talking about examples of things that you've done in your work, and also chatting to other people, getting reference.
Yes. Well, I always make that, the example of, I totally agree with that, because you would never kind of explore topics that you've never spoken about. I'm sure that anyone can be made to feel uncomfortable if one would say, why don't you talk to me about, the climate change? And I was like, I'm not an expert in this topic, even though we hear a lot about it.
Yeah.
But now I couldn't write an expert article on that, and it's, I think that each person, it's a bit like with translation, right? If you become a translator, you are supposed to choose a field that most, kind of represents you, or if you've studied it more and the technical terms that go with it. So if you're a translator, you can't suddenly translate everything.
No.
So why would one speak about everything or anything? And that, I feel like as teachers, we're trying to find a method where like one size fits all in terms of approaches and methodologies, and something that, and I'm afraid it just does not exist. One size does not fit all, and every learning scenario is very different from the prior, and it keeps evolve. That's why I think, with all this artificial intelligence is coming out and the things that you can do, it still needs a human feedback, doesn't it? Because it wouldn't make any sense if someone in that position and with that awareness of what real life is really like can actually say, well, I can use this, but this, no, it's not appropriate. That's the only thing we can count on, is that human feedback of a professional, a qualified professional that would say, okay, I'm not going to use this. And that's really, I'm changing the topic here a little, I'm aware, but excuse me if I digress, but that's the point with artificial intelligence, right? It's a resource if you know how to use it, like with anything.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the danger is that, with all the lesson planning that you can find so many websites and resources online, and that gives you this idea that anybody can teach the content because there's so much resource there, but it's really not true.
There are two variables there, aren't there? There's the teacher, and there's also the students. And yes, you can have a great series of lesson plans, but you still need to adapt them to your learners' needs, interests. You know what they need to work on. So there's never a one size fits all. How could it?
Totally. And you can have the perfect plan and deliver it the most effective way possible, but it still doesn't make you the right teacher for that, because you're just reading off a script. At that stage, the student can learn from that script by themselves. I don't see how you can mediate.
You give the script to the students and they could do it for you.
Exactly. The student has artificial intelligence at their fingertips.
It's for me. I mean,
yes, and it feels like we don't realize that they have the same tools as we have. So what are we? What are we bringing to the table that the students, can't get through artificial intelligence?
I have to tell you a little story about that offline. Just for the moment, we're going to go to the news, and we'll be right back to continue the conversation.
Okay.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
At the National Higher Education Conference, Unison Assistant General Secretary John Richards opened proceedings with a damning critique of the government's approach towards university education, according to Unison's own website. Mr. Richards focused on out-of-touch ministers who failed to understand the current funding crisis, and pointed out that the funding models across the UK seem to be broken. He cited the issue of limited government funding as causing a de facto cap on student numbers, and accused the government of trashing the UK's reputation for higher education in Europe, leading to big drops in the numbers of overseas students. A story covered by Teachers Talk Radio News last week. Mr. Richards went on to assert that those in government do not understand the cost of living crisis because they've never had to face it. Strike action by those working in the HE sector has been part of a wave of action taken by unions across a range of public sectors in recent weeks. The last week saw the release of details of government plans to revamp children's social care in England. BBC News reported on the plan for more early support for families and the extra £200 million funding for the next 2 years. Last year, a review warned that tens of thousands more children could end up in care without additional funding and reform. The plan has faced criticism that many of the changes are being rolled out as localised pilots rather than a national programme. The government plans to put families at the heart of the reform and intends to provide better support for all vulnerable children in order to reduce the need for crisis intervention. There will be pilots in 12 local authorities which will deliver more early support for families struggling with addiction, domestic abuse and poor mental health. There will also be more family-type placement for children in care with relatives, friends or foster families. Other changes include plans to recruit more foster carers, a simpler process and more support for relatives or friends who take on children, a rise in the leaving care allowance, and support for councils to recruit and retain more social workers. Economic, Constitutional and Social Policy Forum Politia has published an article focusing on its views of the proposed changes to the school's history curriculum. The publication History, Whose History? The Battle for the School Curriculum features 3 historians' views on the proposals. The government's plan for reform came in response to recommendations from the Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities. The plan for a new model history curriculum for pupils to see themselves as integral parts of what makes up the UK today was proposed. The essays included in the publication focus in on the responses of a variety of academics who all appear to conclude that there is no need for the proposed changes, because diversity is already built in the current programme. Further details of the publication and forum for debate can be found on the Politia website. Finally, a school principal in a rural part of Northern Ireland has expressed concerns over safety after it emerged that recruitment of lollipop men and women is being frozen. It comes as part of a drive to save money. The current power-sharing deadlock in Stormont meant no budget could be agreed and significant cuts needed to be made. The principal of a rural primary school, Donna Winters, told the BBC that until recently there had been consistent crossing patrol staff that have been vital in making sure pupils can cross roads safely, but that they have not had staff since December. The school has had to resort to employing a patrol staff member directly and, when they are absent, teaching and support staff have to fill in. Ms Winters went on to point out that safety was not an area where cuts should be made. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, it's Safer Internet Week, with the official day being on the 7th of February. This year, the UK Safer Internet Centre focuses on Want to Talk About It, making space for conversation online. They've got loads of educational resources on the website saferinternet.org.uk, banded into 3 to 7, 7 to 11, 11 to 14 and 14 to 18 years of age. They are even translated into Welsh and have adapted resources for SEND and ALD. So, they have pretty much covered all bases. You need to take a look. But why do we need to get our young people talking about this? Well, let me try and give you an idea in one breath. With an estimated 5.16 billion people using the internet, that's 64.4% of the world's population. It's estimated that around 500,000 predators pose a threat to young people daily, with the main target being 12 to 15-year-old children. With a quick search of statistics from the internet, I found supposedly 1 in 25 children will be manipulated in some way this year, and 80% of predatory behaviour will be through social media. This coupled with only 15% of parents actually knowing what their children are doing online makes this an issue which definitely needs to be talked about with our young people. To get some perspective on this, every 60 seconds TikTok users watch over 167 million videos. Data never sleeps. We need to know how to stay safe because the sheer volume of data means it cannot effectively be policed. Please send your thoughts amongst the 575,000 other posts every 60 seconds on Twitter at TT Radio Official. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
And welcome back, Mary. We were just in the break just talking about you have quite a lot of interactions on social media, and I love reading them. I think there are lots of lurkers out there that are listening and liking, or reading and liking. But you just mentioned that you wrote to someone.
Yes, on because LinkedIn, I think, is becoming very aware of this, the native speakerism issue, and Some people write about this discriminatory practice of wanting certain teachers from certain locations, and I posted something on it as well. And this lady answered that she's an English language teacher, but she's okay with people, or referring her own students at a certain level to other teachers who are native speakers, because she understands how that might be the case and better for them.
But how is it better for them?
I think this is the case is here. The case being is that when you have this imposter syndrome, or you have been fed this narrative for such a long time, you start to believe that you are not as good of a teacher as you might think you are. And this lady, I think, and I wrote to her saying that I think that you have, not that I want to be judgmental, I don't know anything about her, but reading that she's a qualified teacher, and then she takes her students up to intermediate level and then passes them off, like willingly. She loses her clients over the fact that she herself tells them, okay, your journey here should end with me, because this is all I can give you. And why don't you go to a native speaker who, you'll learn more from someone who is basically unqualified, but more apt to teach. And it really bugged me a lot. And I realized, there's so many conversations that need to be had, not only for the parents, our clients and recruiters, but also the teachers themselves, because the practice turns into belief, and you're really setting teachers up for failure once they believe that they in fact are not good enough.
I can see that. I can see if you're a new teacher starting out, you might want to start although teaching beginners for me is a lot more difficult than teaching a B2 class.
Yeah.
When you go and actually teach a beginners class again, it doesn't happen very often for me. You really have to stop and think very carefully about the students and what they need, and there's a lot more planning that goes into that. But in the past, sort of in language schools, there was that idea that there was sort of the new teachers would get the pre-intermediate, intermediate levels, and then as you got more experience, you could move up the levels and start teaching advanced and proficiency. And I remember many years ago, we kind of turned that on our head, because we had so many experienced teachers, and the people had kind of got stuck in levels. And a couple of really good teachers said, we're sick of teaching B1 and B2 advanced class. And they're like, yeah, you're absolutely right. But then the people who'd been, like the really experienced teachers who'd been teaching the advanced classes, were really peeved that they then had to come back and they had to come down.
It's happening in the primary school as well, when you have to go from 5th grade to 1st grade, and it's like, oh, I'm not ready, to go from age 10 to age 6 again. But that's not the point of being a teacher. No, the more varied your experience, all the better. I mean,
you need to change levels, because if not, you just get kind of stuck in the day-to-day teaching the same thing all the time.
Yeah, and more teacher talk on that is that when I began teaching for this school that hired me, and as I was non-qualified but sounded the part, I did an upper intermediate class. I remember it to this day, like that was my first experience teaching upper intermediate. Okay. And I remember that I was, I had a conversation. Thankfully, it was the first lesson. I didn't know the student. I didn't know the level. I was just handed the books. Here's the key to your office and go and do this, in company course, by the way. And I was, okay, hi, nice to meet you. And I spoke. And so I said, okay, what do you think you could improve? And as a native speaker would, because at that stage, I was the embodiment of the native speaker with no idea as to how you learn a language, even though I already spoke 4 languages at that stage, but still I had no idea. I never studied a language as a teacher. So I was really a deer in the headlights thinking, what's next? What questions could they ask me? And I was really afraid. And then it was, for me, the hardest part is studying phrasal verbs. I was like, oh yeah, what are they? I like telling this story because it really, I have been the native speaker myself, I can say I was ignorant. I learned about the present perfect well into old age. No one ever taught it to me. I learned English as the most natural sounding language, the language that I heard on TV, on the radio, the songs that I listened to. That's how I learned English. And obviously I wasn't ready to teach. And I realized that from that first lesson, and I was like, oh my God, give me this manual and the teacher book and everything. And I sought teacher training immediately. And I realized, oh my God, there's so many things I don't know about the language myself. And I kind of could like this job. Let's just try and see, right? Unfortunately, it doesn't go like that for most people. Most people are just like, easy money.
Yeah.
I'm not going to invest a penny. They love me for this. I don't need to, I'll just have a drink with my students and tell them I don't know the answers to their questions, and a school will back me up and say I'm a native speaker. And unfortunately, that's what happens. That's why I'm so passionate about this. I'll never stop talking about it, I think, because it's just so wrong on so many different levels. Imagine the company actually paying a lot of money for that.
Yeah.
And the student not having someone who really has their best interest at heart. And how someone else might not be getting that job because they speak with an accent, but know much more than I would have known at that stage, right?
Yeah.
It's painful if you consider the implications of that kind of attitude towards clients, students, people in general.
Yeah, no, it is kind of tricky. I don't know how that. I think the problem is that there are lots of really good organizations out there that are really taking this on board. But they're the kind of smaller, as they call them, cowboy units that aren't. And I think the fundamental cause of all of this is actually money. It's the root of all evil.
It is, isn't it?
But it's a necessity. And I just don't know how. Yeah.
Well, eventually.
Tell me some of your success stories, because I know you've been supporting people and, really, working with people and getting this movement going.
My success stories kind of remain hidden in a way that people privately tell me about the success story, or they tell me that something has changed, or they have stood up for themselves, or they have said something to a recruiter or an employer that they would have never found the courage to do so. But they remain very private. I still think that a lot of people find it hard to come out. I recently did. I'm going to talk about one of my failures because I like to focus on those. I recently said on Instagram that I was going to do like a campaign and say, what have you ever, if you want, I actually put out a post and I said, if you want to collaborate on fighting discriminatory practices, and just, write something in the comments that you want to take part in the collaboration. And many people wrote collaborate. They all wanted to collaborate. And I said, okay, so tell me something. And I obviously stated that as a non-native teacher, something that you have been told that was discriminatory towards you personally, so it might be change your name to a different name, or what nationality are you, or you should be this or that. And I know for a fact that hundreds and thousands of people have been told that, like in my circle of friends, there's so many people who've had that. And I had 0 people wanting to collaborate. And that was my, I learned so much from that post. I was like, wow, how are you going to fight something if you don't want to speak, you don't even want to voice it, and that was a lesson for me.
Could you not get them to give you their comments anonymously, or?
No, because I wanted them, that's what probably if I had told them just write it, they would, but they would never put their face and their name to something that happened to them. I mean, how validating, how much more validation could you, seek? Something that happened to you on a personal level and you can't talk about it.
For fear of losing your job, or what would be the reason behind it?
Yeah, that's my thought. Or, and I was going to share it on it wasn't even going to come up. I could have even not tagged them, but just said, it would have raised awareness more and more, and more people might have found their own voice by listening so many people do their own kind of coming out. But it didn't work. But I'll find other ways to do it. But I realized that, like I said, it's success stories that I'm being told are very on an intimate level and in my inbox. And I take very, very much pride in that. And sometimes it's the actual teachers or recruiters that change their way and they're fighting the system, this backward mentality. So I'm very happy if that happens. And sometimes it could be, someone changing their mind just for like one candidate or two, just because they have, they've seen something or someone has told them something. And I think people underestimate the power of influence. The power that you might not be in the place to make certain decisions, but you can say something that will influence that person's behavior towards even the slightest form of discriminatory practice. And
I mean, I noticed there was a post recently on LinkedIn regarding language teachers in Thailand. Was it Vietnam? In Vietnam,
I think, yeah.
And I think the people that were commenting most on that were actually yourself and the president of IATEFL, Alex. Do you know what I mean? Alex. So she's a pretty important person.
Yes.
I mean, she really does stand up for that. And people in her position, so you've got David Valente and lots of other people who are really, really behind this cause. Not interested in the nationality.
Yeah, but that just proves my point. It's not who is behind it. You can really play a very important part. Just like in your time, you might think you have no influence whatsoever and you don't know important people. But, I am literally a nobody. I'm here, I've been more freelance than
I wouldn't call you a nobody.
I would, because I really started off, like I say, from nothing, and really am still nothing. I've changed. I've never worked the same job for 2 consecutive years as an English teacher, which I take a lot of pride in because I think that I've seen it all. I'm very happy.
Variety is the spice of life.
Yes, and people, I tend to see the silver lining in everything, and I'm happy that I've had, experience with private tutoring, company courses, business courses, advanced courses, IELTS training, primary education, secondary education, English as an L1, I don't think many people can say that, I've even had like elderly people, old grandmas coming to. I've had like my eldest student was like 85. I've seen it all, and I'm really happy that it has given me like a wider perspective. But literally, I don't think I have any influence. If I think about it, if you think about, I'm not within an organization for a long time to be educating anyone. But I have created this sort of platform where I openly talk about things, and that has given me enough power within itself to maybe change or bring a fresh perspective into the minds of those people who have a phone in their hands. So it has changed a lot. And I've heard recently that someone has used me in their own private language, a private course, as a personal branding kind of figure. I'm very good at personal branding, apparently. I didn't know I was even doing that, So I just realized, there's so much power into what the testimonial that you bring as to what has happened, what you're doing, and it changes people's minds when you're open about certain things, especially those things that require kind of a reflective process and a reflection upon your own identity in somehow, both as a teacher, as a human, as a person, and why we are judged. Or why we judge ourselves.
We could make it a metaphor. It's like a little can. You're just slowly, winding it open, and eventually it's all going to come out, isn't it?
It is. Well, it's unavoidable.
Yeah.
It's unavoidable. But yeah, you have to, like with teaching, you have your reflective practices, and they're the most important ones, especially when you've done your a lesson plan, you've done your teaching, etc., etc. Then at the end of the day, you have to kind of self-reflect back on what it is that happened. So we need to be asking ourselves certain questions to not go down that kind of rabbit hole into thinking I'm not good enough, or what went wrong, or why am I not. So you have to ask yourself these questions. And in these busy times, no one really takes the time probably to reflect. I myself hadn't reflected on it when time and time again, first I was being given job opportunities without being qualified. I never questioned myself. I just thought, oh, they're weird. Okay, let's go with it.
Yeah.
So people don't talk about all these things that are happening around us, or things that are happening to us. And we don't even give ourselves the time to elaborate on what just happened, right?
Do you think though that, I mean, you really started out sort of during the pandemic was kind of when it all started to come together, and now we're really only just starting to get back out there. Do you think that might have some kind of influence on impact?
Well, I think I'm glad the pandemic brought about the whole online industry and gave it so much more value than it did. I remember I had bought a book on teaching English online before the pandemic, because I was approaching motherhood, and I thought, okay, I think I can do things, but I'll do it. I'll take my business online and do it there. And then little did I know that we all went on lockdown, and we tried to reinvent ourselves. We started to understand the value of also this, training courses, webinars, events that we could participate. And really, like we were saying before, the resources at our fingertips are amazing. But we realized that we could build this connection with anyone and everywhere across the globe, which should bring us closer. One might think that everything that's happened up until now should have brought people closer. I mean, half of the people I'm in contact with, they're from across the globe, like in a different part. And we're still, I'm very upset to have these different realities, especially if I think of Southeast Asia, where I have a lot of contacts with people who are very, they're excellent teachers, they're professionals in their field. And they keep telling me, and recently I did an event with over 200 people participating, more like in the Arab countries, that they are experiencing lesser pay. They're experiencing, like on the ad itself, it just says that if you are this teacher, you're getting this much. If you're are we even in the same world? Are we even on the same planet sometimes? It's even worse. You know what I mean? There are no laws in place. I mean, here there are laws that are not respected.
Yeah.
But at least there is some law that has been conceived, and maybe not, like we were saying, is someone actually following up?
I don't think, I mean, there's Italian law, European law. I don't think European law is being enforced. We're kind of sticking to the old Italian.
Which is a paradox if you think about it, because, so the idea that no one is doing anything there, and I'm constantly reaching out to people who might know someone who has even a concept of what actually is being worked on.
Yeah.
In terms of, English language teaching industry in Asia. I would love to know. I would love to get involved in that, because it's really bad. It's really bad. It's openly discriminatory. Openly.
Yeah.
We are basically dissuading these people from ever seeking to become teachers. There are not going to be enough teachers. I mean, the whole Anglophone, public, if they all became teachers at a certain point, they wouldn't satisfy the public demand. And there's so much need for English language teachers.
I get little calls like that all the time. Oh, I need an au pair for my daughter. Can you find me a madrilingo? And I'm like, no, they're not just lying around waiting for you to call them, love.
Yes, and it's like, you can't expect everyone who's from the UK to become a teacher.
Until you called me.
Yes, and it's I think also it can have the opposite effect. Like if these are the people who are in becoming teachers and having that as I wouldn't want. I've often considered not doing that and just taking my business elsewhere, because who would want to work in a profession where literally anyone can enter and come and go as they please?
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
how much
might explain turnover in smaller language schools. Sort of staff turnover is quite frequent. Yeah. So plans for the future. What's next?
What's next? As I was saying, that upcoming live series that I'm going to host on LinkedIn and probably upload on my YouTube channel. So more on that. I'm thinking about webinars and workshops as paid events. I've already done one, and you can still catch the replay. It's only a €10 contribution. If you go to my website, you can still find it.
Okay.
So more things. I often do that because it really takes, it's not even like a second job, it's like a full-time job to follow on these things and to find the people that can actually provide value and tell about their own experiences and be vulnerable, really. So it's really hard to get all that content, have those conversations. And before the events, there's literally 10-hour more work preparing, and as you would know. So I'm finding ways, and I'm already working on a course that I hope small language schools might want to get for their staff or, trainee teachers.
I also would think one great thing for you would actually be to develop some kind of course for customer services staff, what they need to be telling their customers.
Yes.
That might be something to add to your list of things to do.
Absolutely. Because, as I was going to a teacher course training, no one ever spoke of that. You realize that the majority of the teachers with you are non-native English teachers or to be teachers, but you don't realize how come and why is it so. I believe I've actually asked some centers to tell me if they could, to kind of tell me the ratio of non-natives versus, but they never told me this. But I bet you the number of non-native teachers who are, non-native speakers becoming teachers is far higher than native. We are the only majority.
To a point where we're just not talking about native and non-native. We're talking about qualified.
Exactly. And some people say that to me, since I advertise myself as the non-native speaker, but I say, well, that's the point. I want it to become something that I can advertise my teaching through being the non-native. So it's like this clash of things. I have to bring it to the level where I say, oh, would you like to study English with me? I am a non-native speaker. That was the goal I had in mind. And because it was, kind of said to me as an insult so many times, I'm like, that's what I'm going to call myself.
I'm going to wear it with pride.
Yes. And I still am. And I love it that every time there is something that, it's in an ad, someone forwards this to me and said, I thought of you because of this. And I love that. But ultimately, I hate this categorization and putting one inside a box. As I said, I was perceived as a native speaker for the majority of my life. Yeah. So I'm just exasperating this concept until it makes no sense whatsoever. Hopefully I will succeed.
I'm sure you will. So
yes,
please do keep us up to date with your work. It's wonderful to see just in a year how far you've got.
Yeah. And I'm planning on doing more events in the future, and going more into speaker mode at live events as well.
Wonderful.
Make it more real.
Wonderful. Keep up the good work, and it is really, really lovely to chat to you again.
Thank you, Jane. Likewise. See you soon. Bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.